Hello, everyone, and welcome to Retirement is Looming. Now what? My name is Ole Kagan. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for LA County Library. And now I would like to introduce to you our speaker for today. Carrie Hannon is a leading expert, workplace futurist, and strategist on career and jobs, entrepreneurship, personal finance, and retirement. She's currently a senior columnist and on-air expert for Yahoo Finance, and the author of more than a dozen books, including Never Too Old to Get Rich, Great Jobs for Everyone 50 Plus, and Great Pajama Jobs, Your Complete Guide to Working from Home. She has covered personal finance, retirement, and careers for the New York Times, Forbes, Money, US News and World Report, and USA Today, among others, and has appeared on ABC, CBS, CNBC, NPR, PBS, and the LA County Library with our Work Ready program. She lives in Washington, D.C. with her husband, documentary producer and editor Cliff Hackle, and her Labrador retriever, Ellie. If you'd like to connect with Carrie after this program, her website is carriehannon.com. Her Twitter handle is @Carrie Hannon, and she's on LinkedIn as Carrie Hannon. And now, without further ado, Carrie Hannon. Hi, Carrie.
Hi there. It is so great to be here. Hi, everyone. And I should say it's great to be back on the LA Library. I got to tell you, this is a really exciting topic, and here's why. Retirement. Oh my gosh. I mean, retirement is not what it once was, right? It's very different today than it was for our parents. And it's a moment in time that we all need to appreciate that this is sort of uncharted territory. And a lot of that is because we're living longer lives, right? There is this longevity that at no time in history has this happened where, we have more people over 65 than under the age of 5. And it's an aging population globally, but we're living these longer lives where once you would retire, and which is not a word I'm crazy about, because to me that seems to indicate you're stepping backwards and withdrawing. But in today's world, you could be, if you were to step away from your primary career at 65, you could have 3 decades to live in quote retirement. So it just sort of changes the whole dynamic about what we can do and what we want to do with these decades of our life. And so I think it's really important. It's kind of interesting because retirement, unlike say when we go off to college, right? There's, college counselors, and you can go visit the campuses and talk to people who go there and things like that. And you kind of get a sense of what's ahead for you. Or when you start a new job, you're onboarded in a way that you learn all the tricks and trades of what goes on underneath the hood. But when we retire, there's really not a good Sherpa to tell us what we're supposed to be doing. Yeah, we understand that maybe it's a time that we step back in this sense, that we can refresh. We do some of the things that we always wanted to do, but we simply did not have time to do. And that's critical. I mean, that is really important. But in this new era of retirement, in fact, it is really, for most people, not a long vacation. This is not a period of just kind of sitting back for most people. What it is, and this is what gets me so excited, because these are years that we have our health. Most of us are living healthier lives, that we really can make an impact on the world and do things that matter to us. And coming out of the pandemic, many of us have had the opportunity to really do that soul searching, to sit back and think, what do I really value? What do I want to be doing with the years left in my runway ahead? Because, COVID scared us, and it still does, the virus, and we lost people we know, and we didn't know what it meant. And that sort of realization of the fleeting nature of life and how quickly things can change sort of reminded most of us, and certainly me, what we want to do with the time that we have and who we want to spend it with. So when you're looking towards retirement, and ideally, gosh, you start at 55 thinking about what you want to do at 65, but in reality, very few people take the time to do that. But if you can, and you do have some years ahead of you before you expect to step away from your primary employer, start that notebook about dreaming. What are some things that you'd like to be able to do? And maybe you can even put them up on your refrigerator or something, trying to give you some ideas of what are you dreaming about? What would you like to do at this stage of your life? But this reimagination of retirement really involves asking yourself some questions. And the questions are things like, who am I? I mean, how am I going to define myself when I'm no longer defined by my job and my workplace? Should I train for a new kind of work? And a lot of people do this, and I write a lot about this, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Do I have enough money? I mean, it's really important to do that financial piece, do that. And no, it's hard to do, but looking at that budget and what do you have to work with? Because if you are financially secure, then you're very nimble about the kinds of things you might want to do if you want to continue to work. And again, I think a lot of people, this is something that is part of retirement, even as a safety net in some way. But it's really a point of defining who you are and how you want to impact the world. So work can be a big piece of that. And in fact, AgeWave and Edward Jones recently came out with this massive study and about retirement, and they talk about the 4 pillars of retirement, which I think are brilliant. Ken Dykewald is the lead writer on this, and it's health, it's family, it's finances, and it's purpose. So these are things that we can these are buckets you might think about as you look towards retirement. How big do you want these to work for you? And for me, the work piece comes under the financial bucket. But what Ken and his team at AgeWave and Edward R. Jones discovered was that 3 out of 5 people actually plan to work in some fashion in retirement. And that might be part-time, it might be for a month, a year, diving in and out of it, but somehow or the other, it becomes a part of that. And what I like about that, and then what I think work is so important is because not only is it that financial piece, but it also gives us this sense of it's good for our brains. It's use it or lose it. You're out there, you're doing stuff. It's good socially. We stay connected to people. We stay networked. We feel relevant. A lot of people, when they step away from work, lose their sense of identity of who they are. And so these are good pieces. It's a good thing if work is something that blends into, and again, it's what you want to do. What do you value? What is it that you'd like to contribute right now? And again, if you have time to plan, you can start thinking about that. You can start taking a class in something. You can reach out to others doing the kind of thing you might want to do in these years. And again, it's a patchwork quilt. It's not like, oh, I'm going to go do this and that's it. You might do something for a few years, switch to something else, or do a bunch of other things. And volunteering is really a piece of this as well. That goes into that purpose piece of it. And volunteering, again, like work, is not just sort of this image you might have of, hey, I'm going to be at the start of a race and help sign people up and so forth. And that's all good and fine. But what I'm talking about is volunteering efforts where you're using your skills, where you are valued within that organization that you're doing that volunteer work for, where your skills are needed and you can really make a difference. And again, that volunteer thing, like working, keeps your network, it keeps you mentally engaged, all of those good things that make for healthy aging, that keep us well. And so, again, that should be a very thoughtful process. And being a successful volunteer, as working is, as a successful business owner or a client or whatever it might be, is employee, consultant, all those things, is you treat your volunteer work like you do a job. I mean, it is something that you are committed to in the same way that you would full-blown paid work. And there's lots of great ways to find those kinds of opportunities. And it might be your employer offers a retiree group that gives you kind of a group that you can work on volunteer projects together, which some of the big companies do that. IBM has done it, and some of the other company, Michelin, there's some other ones I know that have these really vibrant retiree programs. But it might be a nonprofit that you already give money to, that you already contribute your time to. They may have needs for someone just like you, a talented, experienced worker who can really step in and help them with some projects. That's a great source. And then, there are other ones that focus on skill-based volunteering, like Catch a Fire is a good one, or AARP Create the Good has some wonderful opportunities up there. In Idealist is another one. But you'll find around, maybe right in your community, there's a great nonprofit that you've always wanted to step into. So that's one aspect of it that I really, so I'm thinking work and volunteering kind of they share a common spine in a way, because it's using all those skills and experience that you've developed in your working life to continue on in some fashion, but doing it your way, as I might say. And when I wrote my new book, and I do want to talk a little bit about that, and it is focused on work. Of course, it's In Control at 50 Plus, how to succeed in the new world of work. But it's relevant for this, all of us here at this webinar, because in the terms of work, what I talk about is I examined the 5 major trends that I saw coming out of the pandemic, and that have, the pandemic fundamentally changed the way we approach work and the workforce, and it's not going back. Right. So the 5 major things, and this is why it can relate back to you as you eye your retirement and how you might want to work or volunteer during that time, is, and of course I should add that I highly recommend, you step out of work, take that time to hit the refresh button and do those kinds of things you've always wanted to do that are just plain fun. Travel if you can, depending on what we're doing with the pandemic, spend time with family. You want to have balance, make sure you do all of those great things. You might want to move to some place where the cost of living is more affordable, to be near relatives and things. But the trends that I see coming out of the pandemic that really impact our workplace are, one, and this isn't going to surprise you, remote work is here to stay, right? The genie's out of the bottle. And what's fabulous about virtual work is that employers get it. They understand that you're productive, your performance is great, it's a cost savings for them. But for a retiree or someone who's recently retired, remote work offers this wonderful opportunity to continue to work and also not have a long commute, not have to worry about if you have any health issues, mobility, a workplace that's retrofitted for your needs. But you can also, it's great at fighting ageism, because when you're not standing right next to somebody who's a couple of decades younger than you, it just, you're judged more not by your cover, but on what you do. And as anyone can tell, if you look at the job boards these days, the number of opportunities for virtual work have exploded. So it's not simply work in your hometown, but it's a global marketplace. You could be doing work for a company in the UK or a nonprofit somewhere in Italy. I mean, it's just, the world is your oyster, as they say. So remote work is here to stay. It's great for older workers. It's great for retirees who want to just dip back into the workplace. The second piece of that is that contract work, which had been growing previous to the pandemic, really just lit up. I mean, there are more opportunities to do project-based work, part-time work. The job boards all have screens that you can slice and dice what you're interested in doing. LinkedIn has a great jobs board for this. And so you can even narrow down the kind of industry you want to work in, or the kind of work you specifically want to do. And that, to me, is really encouraging for someone who wants to just bring in some income as a financial safety net. It also might allow you to push back taking your Social Security till a later date, so that you get the higher payout, which we all know if you push it back to 70 years old, you get that extra 8% a year annual bump. That's roughly, this is all nuances, but it definitely generally is a good idea, depending on your circumstances, if you can delay that payment. But there's other things. You might be able to keep your retirement accounts without dipping into them in the same way, so they continue to grow. And and work itself, because of inflation right now and because of kind of the rocky stock market and not knowing about what our healthcare costs are going to be in retirement, it's a good idea to maybe have this option, to have this contract-based work. And again, the red flags there are, if you are someone who is retiring early and you are looking for more benefits, you're certainly not going to get those. So you miss out on those employer benefits, but you have the opportunity to have some autonomy, to have some control over flexible work that would work with the rest of what you want to do at this time in your life. And that's critical. That's really key to keep in mind. The third piece, so we have remote work, we have contract work. Career transition, it just took off during the pandemic, and it's at all age cohorts, but definitely people over 50 and retirees too. And I had years ago, I did a book called What's Next? Follow Your Passion and Find Your Dream Job, about people who had worked at in one industry or one kind of job for 20 or 30 years and completely shifted gears to do something completely different. And at that time, it was like, oh my goodness, I mean, you're such a brave person. You have such a, are you sure you have enough runway ahead to really change careers, to do something so different? And in reality, it's really that you're redeploying your skills into a new area. And the pandemic, again, as we talked about earlier, gave us, all of us, that opportunity to do that inner MRI about what do I want to be doing, and doing work in a new field, or even if it's volunteering in a new industry, a new nonprofit area that you weren't familiar with before, is a way that this career transition piece is now kind of woven into the fabric. And it's fantastically energizing and exciting, and it gives you the possibilities to do a kind of work at this stage in life that maybe you hadn't considered. And again, it may very well not pay anywhere near what you were making previously. And that's why financial nimbleness is important, to know that if you actually have enough financial resources, that this is the kind of work that you're doing for many other reasons. And so yes, it gives you a cushion, but it also, you don't need that particular paycheck to pay the mortgage or pay the rent or just cover basic bills. So I love the idea of career transition. I find it really exciting because you're really just redeploying your skills. You're not reinventing yourself, for gosh sake. So you're taking what you've done previously and shifting it to a new direction to kind of re-inspire you again, and hopefully make an impact on the world as well. The next piece is entrepreneurship, which I've loved forever, and midlife to, workers over 50, people over 50, over 45 who start new businesses. It had started pre-pandemic, completely lit up coming out of the pandemic. And a lot of people who did take early retirement, or they were laid off during this time, and said, you know what, I just don't want to deal with going down that path of rejection, of dealing with ageism, or whatever it might be in the job search process, and said, I've always, and again, that inner MRI, I've always wanted to do this. This is something that I think I'm going to try right now. And they're building out these kind of micro businesses on the side, these sort of side hustles, and giving it an attempt to let it get traction, let it organically grow. And because we can do so much of this virtually, because we have this great contract workforce out there, these virtual workers, you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to hire somebody full-time to help you, and your startup costs don't have to be big. If you don't have bricks and mortar, you have your computer. You can hire a virtual bookkeeper to come in once a month, or maybe you want to be that virtual bookkeeper for somebody, but someone to do your social media, or someone to, all kinds of different things that you can get a virtual assistant. So that's kind of fun, and it's kind of a neat connecting of things. And I also see a lot of this is older, people who are near retirement or recently retired, pairing up to start businesses with people in their 20s and their early 30s. And sometimes they're family businesses, and sometimes they're not. But it's this synergy of the generations working together that is absolutely fabulous. And I think it's a model for startups and entrepreneurship moving forward. And so that's something that all of us, I think everyone has a little bit of me Inc. inside of them. So that's something one of the big trends I see coming out of the pandemic. And the final one is learning and lifelong learning. And this applies to all of us, everybody who's here on this webinar. You can never, I mean, learning new things is the most amazing thing in the world. It sort of, reignites you, your mind shifts, you see the world differently. It builds resilience because you're a beginner, you know nothing. And then you kind of develop and you learn something, and it's this rhythm of life. And if you're looking to continue to work in some fashion, this is non-negotiable, of course, because things are moving so quickly. Technology, the kinds of jobs that are out there, it's really rapid. But because during the pandemic, the number of virtual educational opportunities just, boom, we have so many chances now where we can learn even what we're doing right now. Whereas, it used to be you had to get go to a bricks and mortar place, have a school, this kind of thing, get a master's degree or a certificate. Today, you can do a lot of that online. You can find great, certificate programs or just a simple, it's not simple, of course, but to add a new skill, just one new skill. You don't have to have a full-blown program to continue moving forward and embracing working as part of who you are, part of your identity, part of the new kind of work you want to do, kind of reimagining your retirement. So to me, that whole piece of it is super exciting. And, it may even be you're taking classes that have nothing to do with work. You're taking a dance class or an improv class. But you know what? All of it comes back and it impacts you and the kinds of things you do in the world. And the most important thing is to have that mindset that you are employable, that you value, you have that of yourself, you value your moxie, you have this kind of, because that you're not stepping back, but you're really re-engaging in the world in a different way. And I want you all to sort of, think about that. And sometimes the kinds of things we end up doing might even stem from the kinds of hobbies we love to do, the things that we do for fun. And I'm not saying you build these out into businesses necessarily, but you may find skills that you have from your hobbies that you hadn't really even thought about. For example, there's a gentleman I interviewed in my book who he was a salesman, and he lost his job in his 50s and was really trying to get back into the workplace, but nobody wanted to hire him as a salesperson in his 50s. He suspected ageism. I don't know, but he's a fantastic sailor. And so he decided to just go teach sailing down in Longboat Key, Florida, for the winter months. And while he was out with a gentleman teaching him sailing, the guy told him he was looking for a project manager for his company. And the guy said, well, I'm not a project manager. I don't have one certificate on that, and I know nothing about it. And he said, but the CEO of this company said, but yet you are, you've just shown to me, how to get from point A to point B, no matter what the weather is doing, whatever's thrown at you, you know how to get things done. That's what project managers do. So ultimately, this gentleman he applied for the job, he got the job. Of course, he knows the CEO from sailing, so he's got that networking thing going. But he's now been promoted already, and he loves it. He said he never identified a hobby skill as something that he could translate into work in some way. And you could also translate that into the kind of skill-based volunteer work you do as well. So these are just some nuggets of ideas. I'd love to talk to all of you about more things that you're interested in, that I can sort of lend some wisdom or at least encouragement. And so I'm going to stop right there, and I'm happy to go in any direction you want to go in.
Kerry, thank you very much for that, covering the trends and giving us just an overview of how to have a purposeful retirement. And you mentioned you started off with the idea that we need to stop using the word retirement. I know you've written that before. So can you elaborate a little bit more on how to retire the word retire?
Well, I appreciate you asking that, because the word retire really makes me bonkers. But, I have yet to come up with a great other word. And I talked to a lot of people about this. I like to say refire, but certainly that's probably a word that others have thrown out too. The point here is that the whole mental image you get of retirement is of, turning the light off. when in fact, retirement is not that at all. You don't just turn the light off and turn the light back on. And it's not a flip switch. It's a process. It's you may, and if you're really lucky, I think you have the opportunity to phase into retirement, and maybe your employer allows you to step down into retirement, gradually reducing your hours or taking on just certain projects and keeping that connection right there. But if you can't do it with your employer, this idea of some of the notions I threw out here about contract work or remote work of some kind, starting a little side hustle, these are all ways that we continue to not retire. But in fact, and one of my great friends, Chris Farrow, has a book called Unretirement. So I'm not trying to ruin everyone's dream of these days on the beaches or golf course, because certainly go do it, have fun, have balance in your life. But a lot of people, step out of the workplace and yep, they step back in.
And I think one of the ways that, talked about having a meaningful, I guess, third act, one could say, or post work life, or change in work life, is to make it purposeful and valuable. You wrote in your book, which I have right here. I read the book. People asked me, I was reading it on a plane and over the weekend, and people, wait, why are you reading that book? You're 50 plus? And I said, no, but
one day.
One day. But actually, the things in the book are not, I mean, they're specific to people who are over 50, but actually it gives a lot of general advice. I learned a lot from the book. And then one of the things that you wrote about purpose is that it's more important than the money you make. So I wanted to ask, what is your definition of purpose? How do you see that word?
Yeah, oh gosh, that's such a great question, because it's different for all of us. But it goes back to this sense of your core values. And this, a lot of us kind of during much of our life, our working lives, we kind of put that aside, right? We're following, we're doing a certain path that's in a sense preordained for us. But at this stage, you really have the opportunity to think about, what is my mission? I mean, we often think that companies have missions or nonprofits have missions. This is your time to write your own mission statement. What is your why? As Simon Sinek, who's a great speaker and writer, says, what is your why? What is your mission? This is your time to take the time and explore what it is that makes you feel right, that makes you feel engaged in the world. And we all know that by giving, we actually receive. That is a common phrase, but is absolutely true. So what is purpose? It's going to matter. It's going to be different for all of us, but you'll know it when it hits your gut. I can assure you, when you're doing, for me, simply the work I do, and this is part of my work life, but it will certainly be part of what I do with my life, with the hours in my day as I move forward, is I only accept assignments or opportunities or invitations that I feel I can make an impact on someone's life in a positive way. That it's a simple definition of purpose for me. Can I help someone feel more financially secure? Can I help someone find a job that they really, really love? Can I help somebody navigate understanding personal finances so that they don't have that financial insecurity? There's just so many layers of it, but it's quite simple to me. It's, can I have a positive impact on someone's life with my work or my words, since I sell words for a living.
True. Yeah, writer, speaker. It's true. And I've got to say, part of that, it seems like for you from the previous interview, from this interview, from seeing you on screen and the tone in your book, part of that is also, impacting people. And it seems like you're having fun doing it. So we had a question from our audience. Have you met people who have really fun jobs, and maybe give some examples of people who you've met that have reimagined their lives and ended up in jobs that they consider to be fun?
It is. I really, truly have. And it's just like, there's so many examples, but some are bigger, some are smaller. Some people really launch businesses, some just do things as side gigs. But there's someone, this is a big one that I met this gentleman many years ago. Actually, at this point, he was in my book, What's Next. But what he did is, he was a Navy captain, And when he took mandatory retirement from the Navy, he, this guy could land jets on, carriers. And here he ran away with the circus. He always loved the circus. And since he was a little kid, he would go to the circus with his dad, and wherever he was deployed, he would go to a circus. So when he retired from the military, he found work as a manager for what was then the Big Apple Circus, moving a troupe of circus performers up and down the East Coast. His wife, who'd been a nurse, became the wardrobe designer. They had a ball. I mean, it was just, and he said, Kerry, it's not that much different than the military, because everything I did, he redeployed his skills of learning leadership skills, organization, management, all of those things all came together for him. There are fun ones, like people who went from being a botanist and a professor to starting a chocolate making business, Barking Dog Chocolates in Charlotte, North Carolina at that time, or someone who, oh gosh, she went from the insurance industry, and she does this today. She makes these beautiful quilts from wedding dresses, old wedding dresses, or from t-shirts that people might buy at concerts that you want to make a quilt of. For me, I actually have horses. I'm a horse freak. And so I've had her take ribbons that I've won at horse shows and make pillows and quilts out of them. So that's something. She started her own business, and she's phenomenal at it, but she always loved to sew. So she took that. But there are other, bigger, broader stories, people who open up little shops, various shops, or take up farming in some way, or open, I mean, there's just so many different kinds of examples that I just think it's let your imagination go, but it should always somehow be rooted in something that you've always kind of like, what? Oh, this woman who's a nurse, she has this fantastic, who knew it? She loved to woodwork. That her dad had a woodworking thing in the basement. So she used to watch him all the time and do little things. But when she stepped away from being a nurse, she started a little woodworking business. And again, I met her through my horse friends. She loves horses. So she would come to the horse shows and sell like carved, bridle racks or trunks for people, but always a horsey theme. And man, does she have a lot of, followers. People love her work. So, those are just a few I could go on forever. They're fun.
No, these are great examples. And I really like how some of these people, they enter the creative economy. So they took their hobbies and their creative inspirations and made a little money off them in a side gig. We had a question here. How do you suggest we approach managing finances in retirement? For example, making sure that we have enough to sustain life.
Yeah, this is the big crystal ball, isn't it? It's so, it's really daunting. And I honestly, even if you have a great financial planner, I hope everyone, if you can have that opportunity to work with somebody to give you sort of that holistic look of what you have, and really have looked at across the board, the different assets you have, the liabilities you have, what your savings, part of your assets, obviously your retirement savings and so forth. But the big thing that we all go, is medical costs, right? And I just wrote a column about this last week about Fidelity Investments came out with, they constantly, every year, they reevaluate what the hypothetical couple, the opposite sex couple, if they were to retire this year at 65, what their out of pocket after tax medical costs would be. So this is after Medicare. This is stuff that Medicare does not cover. And till the end, to the end of life. So again, that's, you don't know exactly, but they're saying $315,000. I mean, that is a lot of money. So it's sort of like, we don't know. So the things you can do, and this is, so healthcare is going to be, obviously living is a huge cost in retirement, but healthcare is your other big bucket. So, and people often think Medicare is going to be, oh, that's a free skate. It's not. It adds up. It's not chump change what it adds up to. So, and it's a lot that it doesn't cover, like, care, long-term care and things like that. So I encourage people, if you can, if you haven't retired yet, if you're still working, have a health savings account. Health savings accounts are amazing. Very few people understand them or realize that they're out there. And if you have a high deductible insurance plan, you have access to one of these accounts, and you can open them at, Vanguard, Fidelity, but also other resources connected, but you need that insurance plan. But the beauty of that is you can put money in a health savings account that you're not taxed on the money when it goes in. It's invested and you're not taxed when it comes out, as long as it's used for qualified medical expenses. If you get past 65 and you say, guess what, I don't really need that money for healthcare or medical costs, you can still access that money. You just have to pay for the tax as it comes out. But it's a brilliant way to save for future medical costs. And even someone in your family has access to that if they can use it, if they need to use it for qualified medical costs. So I encourage people, there's nuances, of course, with all of this stuff, but I like that. So really, think hard about what that piece is going to mean. And doing that budget and being really careful. I think inflation has a lot of people scared right now because things have shifted. So you want to be very, very cognizant about how you spend your money right now. And I'm not saying you need to enjoy life, but this is something that you need to plan for their longevity. And again, probably the simplest financial tip, since we just said healthcare is expensive in retirement and it's the crystal ball, eat healthy, exercise, get fit, take care of your body. That's the best way you can save costs in retirement, is by staying healthy.
And right on that, and I'm going to ask you to actually continue talking about what you're talking about, because we had this question, and I think it's almost what almost everybody's thinking right now with the climate crisis, the pandemic, the stock market tanking, threats to democracy, etc. It's challenging to stick to a financial plan. And you mentioned the health savings account. Do you have other strategies that you found in your research that might work for just average middle class folks, that might be somehow responsive to all of this shifting and changing and destabilizing? The future of Social Security
Yeah,
is a concern. All of these things make people worry.
Yeah, it does. And I must say, the Social Security folks came out, the trustees report came out on Thursday last week. And the economy, was much more robust than they had expected. So the Social Security system is slightly more protected than it once was. Things are looking a little bit better, but we've got to see some big changes in that program to deal with the aging of our population. So that has simply got to happen. But the fact is, people who think they're not going to get Social Security, I have no fear. You will. It's just the program needs adjustments. Again, but that's not going to pay. That's not an enormous amount of money in reality, in terms of if you've got it. And now it does have the adjustment for inflation, your Social Security. And that's a good thing. That's really a great thing. I like, depending on people's different situations as an investment, I've been a big fan of I bonds. I think they're tied to inflation. You can't take them, you have to invest for a period of time, but it is one of those inflation protected investments that we can make that isn't volatile in the way that the stock market is. So again, but you buy that directly. You don't have to go through a financial advisor or a brokerage or anything. You do that directly through the Treasury Department, treasury.gov, and you can do that. So that's another kind of investment. But again, it really comes down to understanding what you have to work with, being careful. And I got to say, I like working. And I don't mean working like you did before, but just finding ways that you can find a little ways to build in a cushion as long as you can. This only maybe phases in for a period of years in retirement, but it is really a nice way to stay mentally engaged and also have just a little bit of ballast there.
So let's talk about it, because we've already started talking about the financial aspect of it. And in your book, you talked about different types of fitness. You talked about financial fitness, physical fitness, and spiritual fitness. And so financial, I think we've covered. How about physical? How do you do something that's maybe purposeful or meaningful physically? I'm going to ask you about spiritual next, but maybe cover physical a little bit.
Well, I'm just a huge fan of Carrie's fitness program. And so, yeah, we've got that financial piece. We're trying to beat that one down. But again, it's really, just to quickly summarize that one again, it's you've got to get lean and mean. You've got to, how can I pay down debt? Because credit card debt is the worst, right? Because that's going to sink you. And money is the biggest obstacle. Debt really, is a dream killer. So, and this takes time. So anything you can do to be very just lay it all out there and be honest with yourself about what that looks like and how can you get lean and mean. And again, moving to might involve moving, maybe not, but there are ways that you can find to do that. But the fitness piece, the physical fitness, now this helps if you do want to continue working a little bit in retirement, because it helps to push back on ageism, in my opinion, because people do judge a book by its cover, right? So if if you're physically fit, which also involves eating with an eye on nutrition, you have this can-do spirit, this positivity about you. And people want to be around you. They want you on their team. And so this is true for volunteering opportunities as well. People go like, yeah, like, because you know what, when you're signing up for volunteering, it's not come one, come all. It's a bit of an interview process. If you're going for really a volunteer position that is skill-based, they're not interested in just having bodies laying around. They want somebody to step in there and work. So they're evaluating you. And if you are physically fit, you come off as somebody who can offer them what they need. You have possibilities. You feel you have that energy, and it's hard to put a finger on what that is, but it just makes your life a whole lot better. And again, I'm not talking bench pressing or running fast miles. I walk a couple miles a day with my dog. So that's what I like to do. But you might like to swim, or maybe you like to take a dance class. But whatever you do, build it in a couple times a week so that you have that sort of inner core. That's going to help you with everything from what we just said, healthcare costs, but it also mentally, it just keeps you vibrant in a way that it's often overlooked, the importance of that. But as a country, as a nation, we have some serious health issues with hypertension and diabetes and things like that. And anything you can do to keep your body in shape is going to really have financial repercussions for you in a positive way as we age. And now you're going to ask me about spiritual. Do you want to, or do you want me to go more down that?
No, I like that you just mentioned the financial being healthy has a lot of financial repercussions. I'd say financial rewards even.
Oh, it's huge. And truthfully, eating healthy is cheaper than eating, all that junk food. It's, an apple and yogurt and that kind of stuff. Granola is really not as expensive as a whole bunch of potato chips and, good chocolates and stuff. Although I like all of that stuff. But really, if you, a diet of fast food is not necessarily cheap when it comes to your body. So you have to think of it in those terms. But I do think we have to think of the financial, how our whole lives are impacted by that, and health, how we take care of ourselves really matters. And the thing, the interesting piece of it, like, is that when you're physically fit, you have this energy and you have this sort of you think about things that you want to do, the things that engage you. You have this curiosity. And that's what makes this stage of life really exciting, as you called it, maybe the third act, but it's that eagerness to stay a part of it, to stay engaged. That's what matters. And when you're fit, you have that energy that just translates into that.
Definitely. And so now I think on that note, let's move on to the spiritual fitness. So when you wrote about three fitnesses, and though the first two are relatively straightforward, so what do you mean when you wrote about spiritual fitness?
Yeah, and I'm not talking about, big time religion or any of that, which is all fine. And we all have our own definition of what that means to us. But what I'm talking about here is that a kind of spiritual fitness that is this internal ballast. It's a way of centering ourselves, of kind of letting the stresses of the world kind of drip away, even if it's just for a period of time. And that is so revitalizing. It is so renewing. And the ways you might do that is, mindful meditation or Tai Chi or yoga. For me, again, I'm going to go back to walking my beautiful Labrador retriever in the country. If I'm out in the country and I'm walking down a country road and I'm just seeing nature, I find that really calming and really soothing. And I'm allowed to I let go of all those things. And when you enter this stage of our lives, which we are going to call, for now, retirement, we it's scary. It's like, as I said, nobody onboards you. It's this stressful unknown, like, what am I going to do with my days? I mean, at first it might seem great to not have to be anywhere, but then all of a sudden you're like, well, wait a minute, I'm not feeling relevant. I'm losing my friends. I don't have this network. And so when you have, it's jarring. And I think if you can build this sort of spiritual ballast into your life, it's good for anything you do in life, but it's particularly important when you're going through a change, when you're taking a pretty significant change in the way your life has been organized and starting off in a new direction.
So you mentioned during your talk at the beginning, lifelong learning, and you have a whole chapter on learning in the book. Learning particularly for people who are at work, where you say you have to keep on learning all the time. You can't stop learning, and I think that's true in retirement too. Now you mentioned a few different learning resources that were free, and it's interesting, and it's a fun coincidence that you mentioned the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute in the book, and actually one of our staff is presenting for the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute of Dominguez Hills right at this very moment.
I love
Um,
it. I love it.
so, do you want to talk a little bit about the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute and then some other lifelong learning resources and some other ways for people to maybe identify the kind of things that they might want to learn in their next stage of life?
Yeah, and it all begins with that word curiosity. What are some of the things you always wanted to study or you wanted to learn? And Osher is wonderful because it's on, they're on virtual now, but they're also on campuses, on, different, they have all kinds of programs and they're not long. It's not a huge commitment. You can step in, for a couple, even for one lecture, or it could be a couple of things. So there's lots of ways to slice and dice it. They've been around for a long time. It's super legitimate and lots of fun. There's a new group called Get Set Up that launched. It's a virtual
Get
platform,
Set Up.
and
I'm going to interrupt you, Carrie,
it's
because the library offers free access to Get Set Up. Just I
I
don't
didn't
know
know
if
that.
people
Okay,
out there know
great.
that, but yeah, from our website, you go to lacountylibrary.org/learn, and there's a link on the right hand side to Get Set Up. I'm going to let you tell people about Get Set Up. It's great.
Well, I'm a big fan of Get Set Up. I just think they're great. It's people over 50 teaching people over 50. And if you actually want to do that little part-time gig, they pay people over 50 to be instructors on this site. But it's fun. You can jump in and just do a class on something. They just started, and this is probably not exactly what everyone here is looking for, but they just started a whole entrepreneur program that's sort of a course in entrepreneurship. They several courses that sort of, it's a gateway to that opportunity, but they're fun stuff too. It's yoga classes, or it's all kinds of cooking or travel, learning about travel things. And so there's ways they have lots of stuff out there, lots of great opportunities. So I think that's a fun one. Just check it out, if you can, because something might capture your attention, and then you can go do a deeper dive somewhere else if you would like to. But that's a great one. There's the basic ones we all know about, well, not everyone, but Coursera and that sort of stuff. There's sort of high-end learning opportunities that a lot of universities are offering now. And this is, they can come with a price tag, but you can also get tuition, programs. They have all kinds of different ways to cut that bill. But Stanford has a nice program that's for people looking for their encore careers, but it's for retirees. There's Notre Dame University has an inspired leadership initiative that also cohort of retirees come back on campus for the school year, and you take classes with undergraduates, and it's really fun. And it's your spouse can come with you, that kind of thing. Modern Elder Academy is wonderful. Chip Connolly started down in Baja, that you go for a week or 5 days or something, and it's sort of a retreat, but they're all learning. And in fact, I'm going to teach entrepreneurship there in November for a week. So these are different so you can go, those are kind of high-end commitment programs a little bit, but all the way down to just taking that Get Set Up one class, and what it is that you'd like to just ramp up a little bit in.
It Get Set Up is delightful. I was able to sit in, even though I'm under 50, I was able to sit in on one of the classes when the library just got it. And it's so fun. It's just like this, but there's it's on Zoom, it's all virtual. And you pop into the class and there's just a few people, and the instructor is just talking to you guys, and you can talk back, and it's usually at the instructor's home, and I watched a cooking class, and it was really fun. Um, and then
Yeah.
you mentioned Coursera, and I think in the book you talked about Skillshare, which is a lot about it's entrepreneurship and hobbies, and also free from the library. I posted a link in the chat. I've got us. It's I'm obligated to say that all of these things are that you get Coursera and Skillshare free from the library, and LinkedIn Learning is free from the library. All of these things actually cost money without your library card, but the library card makes it free.
Oh, and I'm glad you said LinkedIn Learning, because that's one of my favorites too. I mean, LinkedIn Learning has some wonderful classes out there, and they've really ramped up the offerings, and
Mhm.
that's an important resource for people, whether it's not just about, continuing to stay relevant for work. It's just for, while I was talking to my brother-in-law who retired 2 years ago last weekend, and he's now teaching. He worked for a big utility company. He's an attorney by trade, and he was a legal counsel, and he's teaching at Clemson University as an associate professor 2 days a week. So he loves that. Now, this isn't a big paying thing, but he loves being able to give back his knowledge to these business school students. And so that's been really rewarding for him. But and he has these activities. He's joined, mountain biking club. So he mountain bikes, and he likes to, go out hiking. He's got all these things he likes to do. And he carefully had a notebook of things he wanted to do in his retirement. And you know what? He's checking these things off. But one thing he said to me, one piece of that, Carrie, because I'm always saying, you got to keep learning, you got to keep learning so you're relevant. He goes, Carrie, why can't I just learn because I just want to learn,
Yeah.
just for my own knowledge, so he started reading books that he had set aside for years that he hadn't, oh, I'll read that one day. And he said, it's not that I'm going to use that for any kind of work. It's personal enrichment. It is, I feel empowered, and I like learning, some of this big thinking that I didn't have time to let sink in when I was working like crazy person, right? And I think a lot of us, we have to give ourselves permission that it's okay just to learn for just the simple sake of personal enrichment.
I'm all about that. And you see things in the news sometimes. There's a lot of stuff about blockchain and all these kind of cryptocurrencies, and there's so many things that come up all the time, like what's happening in Ukraine. And somebody might look at that and go, and in the past go, well, I can't just take a deep dive into into blockchain. But now you can. And not only can you can take a shallow dive first. For example, LinkedIn Learning. You want to learn about blockchain. Like people are talking about NFTs. What are NFTs? NFTs. You can learn about NFTs by taking a 45-minute lecture on LinkedIn Learning. I know it's there because I was looking at it yesterday. And same
But
thing with,
I
yeah,
mean, I just so I'm happy you said that, because it also connects to generations, right? And this is what I want to encourage everyone who's thinking, particularly about retiring and volunteering, but potentially if it's retiring and continuing to work in some way, try to find ways to connect with the younger generations in whatever it is your endeavor is. Because Mark Friedman, who founded Encore.org, and if you don't know about Encore, you should check it out because they're really a cool group. He said the fountain of youth is the fountain with youth. So it's really important to find things that connect you. And so one thing, when you were saying that, I was thinking, get on TikTok. I even
I don't know if I could recommend that.
you
It
got to
takes
learn,
up
you
so
got to
much
know.
time. It's
I
it's
know
very
it.
addictive.
but but you'll learn current culture. I mean, it's so easy to forget, who is, Billie Eilish or whatever. I mean, you might not remember know who, if you just you stay current with culture by some of these things. And it's not, you pick what it is for you. But I think it's easy to step out of the mainstream and not keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening around us, because that's what engages us. It keeps us, looking forward instead of backwards. And isn't that what it's all about?
I love that quote that you just mentioned. What was it again?
The fountain of youth is the fountain with youth.
That's great. I really like that a lot. I wrote it down. I'm gonna
I just
I'm
do,
gonna I'm
yeah.
gonna I'm gonna hold on to that.
But it's true, this is a group, but we're talking about retirement. But I'm 61 actually, and I actually started a full-time position at Yahoo Finance in January. And my editor is a couple decades younger than me. I've never asked her exactly, but I'm telling you, working with her is so incredibly energizing. And I totally respect her. She's so smart. And she respects me in return, which makes me feel good. And but I'm telling you, that energy of working with somebody who sees things from a different set of eyes, a different generation, is astounding. And I had forgotten. I talk about that to older workers all the time, but now I'm living it, and I'm telling you, it works. I have a whole new, renewed way of looking at the work I do.
I was going to ask you about that because you mentioned a few times in your book that you got advice from your nieces who are, I think one of them is in her
Yeah,
in her 20s, and I think right around there, like in their early,
yeah.
I mean late teens, early 20, and then late 20s, which I thought was great. So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that because I think that for many people they feel sort of out of touch with the younger generations. How do you approach, getting advice or almost like reverse mentorship or mentorship in both ways, without feeling intimidated? How do you approach that sort of situation?
I wonder, I don't know specifically what you have out there or programs the library might have, but I know, say in New York City, there's a volunteer program that matches seniors with younger mentors in their 20s. And for example, one woman, and then goes into the starting a business thing, but she won't tell me her age, but she's somewhere under 100, she said. So, but she was a bit in the fashion industry with Liz Claiborne and Ellen Tracy and big names. And then she retired, and um, she started a nuts, like it's called Opera Nuts. She loves the opera. And so it's totally, on the computer business where she mixes up these incredible nuts with, almonds and chocolate. I mean, I'm telling you, it's fabulous. I'm sorry, I'm not doing an ad for her, but it's great. But New York City had this program that they matched her with somebody younger who she met in a library, in the library in New York, one of the libraries there. And this young girl in her 20s really helped her learn how to put up a website and how to start her business. And she wasn't afraid to ask her questions because it was built-in knowledge that she didn't know anything. And so there are opportunities out there. AARP actually has some good opportunities there to find ways to connect with somebody younger. But often it's just who do you know within your network that you can start to pair up with if you have questions. And volunteering situations might offer that to you, but again, I think it often comes from a community-based effort.
Thanks, Carrie. And I just want to invite the folks out there, if you have questions, please do post them in the Q&A, post them in our chat, and we have a little bit more time left, and we're happy to answer your questions. So I had a question about social media. You mentioned the power of social media, and you just always talked about TikTok in several of your books. So, you talked about it in this book, of course, but you
Yeah.
talked about it in other books too. So I wanted to connect with something that we previously talked about. How can you use social media to connect with your purpose?
Yeah, I think it's really actually a tremendous way to, you can follow groups that you're interested in, simply as that, on LinkedIn or on Twitter or Instagram. You can find ways to find out what people are up to. You can also, in Facebook, you can also find ways that you can engage with them. You might even be able to find volunteer opportunities that way. But being on these kind of platforms, and yeah, there are some people are reluctant to get on. You don't have to be active on them if you don't want to be. You can just kind of scan through, but you pick up things. It keeps you a little bit sharper, a little more relevant. But I do think these platforms are important to learn about opportunities of things you might want to do moving forward. And if you have a business, for sure, you need to be involved in some way, because if you're looking for work, if someone's looking to hire you, they're going to do a Google search on you. So they're going to find out if you have a Facebook profile, if you're on LinkedIn, and if you're a white collar worker these days, you really should have a LinkedIn profile of some kind. It showcases who you are, and whether it's just looking for contract work, or which isn't just, if you're looking for contract work or remote work, this is a great way to showcase who you are and talk about your interests in almost a chatty way. The summary can be very informal, and it shows your personality in a way that a resume doesn't. So I think it's important to explore the channels that work for you. I personally, and the younger generation, the Gen X's and millennials and stuff Gen Z aren't that interested in Twitter. I still find Twitter good and keeps me current. And everything I write, I put on Twitter, I put it on LinkedIn, I put it on Facebook, sometimes on Instagram, but that's my way of staying connected to others.
There's always new social media platforms coming out, and
Yeah.
it's a bit of a risk just to explore them, but it's also a lot of fun because you get to explore a whole new. I remember when Twitter just came out and people said, I can't possibly communicate in such a small area of micro blogging. It's too micro. And those people are now all into Twitter. So we all learn. We all can learn different ways of interacting with each other. And I think there's only going to be more interesting social media platforms coming out for us to explore. So there's no questions from the audience at the moment. So I wanted to end with something that I think was very interesting in reading In Control at 50 plus. It was an interesting fact that you pointed out, and I wanted to get a little bit more information about it, or a little bit more insight about it. So you cite studies that show that older workers handled the pandemic better than their younger colleagues. Do you think that's just as a result of having more experience or a longer perspective, or are there other qualities for older workers, and I think older adults in general, that explain that added resilience?
Yeah, isn't that a wonderful? It's so I've seen that a couple of studies that have shown that, and we just didn't. I think it is a product of experience. It is a product of having been through setbacks in our lives, of having, things happen. We've lost people we love. We've experienced sort of very dramatic, a recession, 9/11. There have been all kinds of things where you think, you're right at the precipice of something really dreadful, but you see that you come through it. There's a setback, whether it's personal, whether it's global. These things, we kind of come with this sort of resilience that's built into knowing that we can get to the other side. And in fact, we will. Yeah. So there wasn't this sort of mental, and I'm not downgrading in any way, because the stress of the pandemic it took a really big emotional and mental toll on a lot of people of all ages. But people who of a certain age really did ride it out somewhat better and were able to find ways to draw on that strength that they had from having gone through other kinds of shifts, to realize that things are going to get better. They are, and it's this optimistic kind of thing, but living life has often shown us that, yeah, it's going to be different. Things aren't going to be the same. They can be fundamentally changed, but it doesn't mean they're worse.
Thanks, Carrie. We did have a question come in, and I'm not sure that you're able to answer this question, but perhaps you've seen some research that could be of use to our asker here. So the question is there a state that may be the best place to retire with the best tax advantages and good health care?
Oh my gosh. There are, if you Google it, there have been surveys and studies that really drill down on some of the best states everyone likes to do, these are the best places for retirees. And so I would look at some of them. I know that I think US News and World Report has done a good one. Money Magazine used to always do one, Wall Street Journal. So every year or a couple of years, people look at these and they review. Kiplinger's, I think, did one recently.
And Forbes
They
always
kind
does
of
them too.
pull out. Forbes does, they pull out the taxes, all the things that really matter, the low cost state. So now, one thing I'm going to say in this area, because often you'll see Sunbelt kind of states come up, but let's think a minute about climate change. So if in fact the world is going to be getting a bit hotter and the seas are going to be rising a bit, you got to think about the cost of maybe air conditioning and electric bills in some of these places, or, insuring homes in some of these beachside towns that people, dream of having a beach cottage. Well, yeah, it's fantastic. But if you're thinking down the road, there are some red flags here. So I just would caution people to take whatever you find in these surveys. I personally think college towns are great because they're a bit recession proof. You've got new people coming in all the time, a younger generation, which is fantastic. There's usually work opportunities for older workers if they choose to get involved because it's fairly, there's stuff going on. You usually have a great culture. I mean, there's all kinds of, theater or speakers coming to the university. So even retirement communities that have built up around some colleges can be a great opportunity. And Osher usually is set up in some of these too for learning opportunities. They pair up with the universities. So college towns I like, and they're often can be in affordable areas of the country. The other thing I noted, I did a column a few months ago looking at this trend of people who've decided to retire and not go to Arizona or to Florida, but they're going back to their hometown. They're going back to where they grew up. And maybe that's Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, maybe it's Boston, maybe it's, Madison, Wisconsin, whatever it might be. They're going back to their hometown. They're going back to a place where they develop their roots as kids and maybe they still have family. I think that's kind of interesting. And they're going to Cleveland or whatever. And I don't know, I like that. There's something I find really, really nice about the idea of you can go home again.
Sounds good. There's one of our attendees just posted a quiz for places to retire quiz. I just reposted that in the chat, and I'll post it in the follow-up email. And everything, all the links that you mentioned, Carrie, I'm going to send them to folks in the follow-up email, so that if anybody missed anything, because you talked about a lot of different things. You covered a lot of different angles on retirement and gave a lot of suggestions. So have no fear if any of the folks out there, if you missed anything, I will put everything in the follow-up chat, and the video recording of this presentation will be shared with you as well. It'll be posted on YouTube, and a link will be sent in the follow-up email. Carrie, thank
I
you.
would encourage, I know you're wrapping up real quick, but I want to say, I would encourage people, if they're thinking of moving in retirement, for that moving to a state or a new town where the cost of living is less and all of those good things, taxes and so forth, go and live there first if you can, at least rent, check it out, because often people can make a move sort of on an emotional thing and they think they've done their homework, but until you've actually lived somewhere, actually don't really know. So if there's any way you can test it out ahead of time, rent a house for a couple of months, whatever it might be, if you have that opportunity, I think you're going to set yourself up for a happier decision and a more successful move in retirement.
And maybe along with that, if you're going to do short-term visits or, sort of longish short-term for a few weeks at different seasons, because different times of year, different places are vastly different. So whether that's weather.
You might have allergies that you don't know that in the spring, you're not gonna be able to breathe because you're allergic to whatever it is, the azalea bushes. So, I mean, it's really, you might not know that if you go there in December.
Or in the college town where it might be totally dead in the summer. If the students are all, or like the winter, all the students are gone and it's completely, nothing's happening.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. That's smart. At different seasons for sure.
All right. Well, once again, Carrie, I always a pleasure to have you on with us, and I'm sure that we'll have you back. And I hope the folks out there got something from this presentation about pathways to a purposeful retirement. And with that, Carrie, thank you again, and we'll see everybody next time.
Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.